Samuel Carver walked into the dealership with a steady gait. His simple clothes were a stark contrast to the judgmental eyes that followed him. He announced his intention. He was there to buy 12 pickup trucks. The salesman's laugh cut through the showroom air. Preston Vance spread his arms theatrically. His voice boomed across the polished floor. 12 trucks. You look like you couldn't afford a bicycle. Heads turned. An employee dropped his clipboard. Preston stepped forward, placed a hand on Samuel's shoulder, and shoved him back a few inches. This isn't a museum, my friend. Go find your fun somewhere else. The laughter around them grew. Some customers started whispering. One of them discreetly pulled out a phone and began filming. The farmer took a deep breath, showing no reaction. The bully pressed on. Let's be clear, this isn't a flea market. If you don't have the money, you don't get past the door. Brenda Hayes, the manager, watched in silence. The other salespeople were enjoying the show. Preston raised his voice. I'll make you a deal. If this guy can prove he can pay, I'll swallow my car keys right here in front of everyone. The crowd stirred. An older woman laughed. Another customer muttered, This is gonna be good. The entire showroom turned into a makeshift courtroom. Samuel lifted a worn briefcase, holding it tightly. I have until the end of the day to close this deal. If I don't, I lose the hauling contract for the harvest. Brenda Hayes crossed her arms, her voice hardening. We don't have time for theatrics. Without the manager's approval, nothing moves. Preston smiled, confident. Samuel opened the briefcase. He pulled out a contract. The numbers on it represented millions in grain. The nearest table went quiet. The laughter died in the air. For a moment, the showroom was silent. Preston's mouth snapped shut. The first blow had been struck. The silence in the dealership was heavy as lead. The hauling contract lay on the table, its bold numbers printed in black and white. Samuel raised his eyes and met every face in the room. For the first time, he didn't have to defend himself. He just stood there, the truth on display. Preston forced a nervous laugh. That's just a piece of paper. Could be fake. I want to see cash. The line broke the tension, but not in his favor. The customers weren't laughing anymore. A man in a suit, drawn by the commotion, approached. It was Michael Evans, the manager of the dealership's partner bank. He recognized Samuel instantly. Mr. Carver, he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. You're a premium client at our branch. The reaction was immediate. Murmurs swept through the room. Preston swallowed hard. Brenda, the manager, straightened her posture. A premium client? She asked, trying to regain control. Michael took out his phone and quickly accessed his records. He showed the screen to the manager. He's moved over $15 million through his account in the last 6 months alone. There's no question. The statement hit like a hammer blow. Any remaining laughter evaporated. A woman who was filming gasped, "Oh my God!" The atmosphere shifted. Samuel didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply watched, calm. Preston still insisted, his voice faltering. There must be some mistake. It can't be. Samuel stepped forward. It's no mistake. I own over 2,000 acres of soy and corn. This purchase isn't a whim. These are work tools. He opened another file, meticulously organized. He displayed satellite maps, production reports, and export agreements. Each page was another brick in the wall, pinning the salesman against a corner. Brenda Hayes tried to salvage the situation. Mr. Carver, I apologize for the misunderstanding. We can talk in my office. Expedite your purchase discreetly. Samuel looked her straight in the eye, firm. No. What started in public will end in public. The entire room held its breath. The villain was losing ground. Preston tried to laugh again, but his voice cracked. I was just joking. Leo Ramos, the young salesman who had been watching from a distance, stepped forward. Silent until now, he found his courage. Joking? You called the man a beggar. You pushed him in front of everyone. That's not a joke. Preston's colleagues shifted uncomfortably. The mood was no longer on his side. The audience, which had been laughing, now shook their heads in disapproval. The villain felt the tide turning against him. Samuel took a deep breath and continued. My father always said that dignity isn't something you ask for. It's something you earn. I didn't come here for a favor. I came here to invest. The memory of his father's voice hung in the air. Suddenly the crowd didn't just see a farmer, they saw a man with a history. Michael, the bank manager, added, if this man wants to buy 30 trucks, he can. The crowd gasped. One customer whispered, 30? I can barely finance one. Preston's face turned beet red. Brenda realized the situation was spiraling out of her control. Mr. Carver, we'll prepare the contract immediately. But Samuel wouldn't be rushed. A contract isn't enough. I want respect. Leo stepped forward once more. Sir, if you'll allow me, I can help you choose the models. The gesture was simple, but it broke the tension. Samuel nodded in agreement. Preston shrank back, his face a mask of anger. Brenda shot him a furious glare. The room became a stage for a reversal of fortunes. The crowd that once judged now admired. Murmurs of support rippled through the air. That man is a giant, someone said. Another added, that salesman should be ashamed. The pressure on Preston intensified. He tried one last gambit. Fine, but an order of 12 trucks is a scheduled delivery. It'll take months. Samuel remained unfazed. I've already addressed that. He pulled a printed email from his pocket, sent by the auto manufacturer's own national headquarters. It was a special authorization for the immediate release of the fleet. Signed by Richard Sterling, the national director. The bomb dropped. The crowd nearly applauded. Preston was floored. Brenda turned pale. Michael nodded, satisfied. How did you get that? Preston blurted out. Samuel stared him down. Because I don't underestimate anyone along the way. I respect the people I work with, and they respect me back. The silence returned, but it wasn't one of awkwardness. It was one of awe. Every eye in the showroom recognized the authority of the man who arrived humble and was walked all over, but who now stood tall. Preston tried to speak, but his voice was weak. I thought... Leo cut him off sharply. You thought wrong. The audience erupted in laughter, this time at the villain's expense. The circle was complete. The first punishment had arrived. The salesman had no allies left. Brenda, mortified, stepped away. Michael extended a hand to Samuel. You don't have to prove anything else, sir, but I confess I've never seen someone dismantle so much arrogance in so little time. Samuel shook his hand. This isn't about arrogance. It's about respect. The words resonated. People in the crowd nodded. An older woman who had laughed earlier approached him. I'm sorry, sir. I misjudged you too. He simply responded with a serene look. The clock on the wall showed that just over 7 minutes had passed since he walked in. In that short time, the villain had gone from laughter to humiliation. But Samuel knew. It wasn't over yet. Preston leaned against the counter, sweating. The crowd watched, waiting for the next move. The story no longer belonged just to the farmer. It belonged to everyone watching, everyone who carried their own guilt, everyone who had ever been judged. And in the air hung an unspoken promise. There was a deeper secret. Something that was about to break every heart in that room. Preston Vance was cornered, but not defeated. The public shame burned inside him. As customers murmured and employees averted their gazes, he quickly calculated his next move. The humiliation he had just endured in front of everyone could not be the final act. He straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and put on a fake smile. Very well, Mr. Carver, if I should even call you that. But we still have internal policies. It's not so simple to release 12 trucks at once. Brenda Hayes watched him with suspicion. She heard the venom in his tone, but also knew that any management mistake could be costly. She didn't intervene. Preston opened a drawer and pulled out a stack of forms. He spread them across the desk like a deck of cards. We're going to need a guarantor. It's a requirement of our risk management policy. No guarantor, no contract. The customers exchanged glances. One of them whispered, "A guarantor for someone who moves millions. That's not a thing." Samuel remained silent. His impassive face made it clear he was unshaken. He simply raised an eyebrow. "A guarantor," he repeated calmly. "I've never been asked for one for any purchase." Preston forced a laugh. "Well, every dealership has its own rules. Ours prefers to be secure." Leo, the young salesman, couldn't hold back. "That's not standard practice, Mr. Vance. We've never asked for a guarantor on any sale." The villain shot him a death glare. "You stay out of this, kid. You're still on probation." The tension in the room returned. Some customers were openly outraged. A woman said loudly, "This is harassment. It's so obvious." Preston heard her but feigned indifference. He picked up another paper. "In addition to the guarantor, we'll need a certificate of good standing from the IRS. An updated document no more than 30 days old." Brenda finally stepped in. "Preston, that's not required for an individual sale." He replied curtly, "For this case, it will be." The crowd reacted with murmurs of disapproval. Samuel raised his hand, asking for silence. "Don't worry. I know how to deal with people like this." He looked the salesman in the eye. "Go on. I want to hear every obstacle you plan to invent." Preston felt his blood boil, but he maintained his icy smile. "Very well. We will also require an on-site inspection of your farm to ensure it actually exists and is operational. Until then, no contract will be signed." The showroom erupted with comments. An indignant man shouted, "This is a joke. The man has a contract with a bank, proof of funds, even an authorization from the national director. What more do you want?" Preston pretended to arrange the papers. "I'm just following protocol." But everyone knew he was lying. Samuel took a deep breath. Inside him, the memory of his father's voice echoed, "Never bow your head to injustice. The land taught you to be firm." He decided he would not leave there a victim. "So let's make this clear. The problem isn't the money. It's not the contract. It's not the rules. The problem is that you can't stand to see a black man buying more than you can possibly imagine." The sentence landed like a grenade. The silence was absolute. Brenda's eyes widened, unable to deny it. Preston swallowed hard. That's slander," he stammered. "You can sue me if you want." A customer answered loud and clear, "Sue you? No need. We're all seeing what you're doing." The pressure was mounting. But Preston didn't give up. "I'm just doing my job, and if he thinks he can walk all over the rules, he's mistaken." Samuel faced him again, resolute. "I'm not backing down." At that moment, Leo took a step forward. "Neither am I." The young man's courage acted as a spark. More customers spoke up. One of them started clapping. Another added, "This isn't business. This is a witch hunt." Preston started to lose his composure. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He then played his final card. "All right, if you really want to buy them, you'll have to sign a special clause. Payment in full, upfront. No financing, no installments. 12 trucks, wired in full." The audience reacted with disbelief. "That's ridiculous," an older woman exclaimed. "No dealership asks for that." Samuel didn't flinch. "Deal." Everyone fell silent. The shock was absolute. Preston's eyes widened. "What?" I said, "Deal. Payment in full, up front. Today." He pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed quickly. On speaker, the call went straight to his bank branch manager. "Good morning, Sandra. I need to wire the full amount to the dealership's account for the purchase of 12 trucks. Please prepare the transfer." On the other end, the bank manager's firm voice replied, "Of course, Mr. Carver, the operation is cleared." Preston turned white as a sheet. Every person in the showroom was now looking at him, not the farmer. Their stares said what was obvious. The game was over, but the villain wouldn't accept it. "This is an abuse," he shouted, losing control. "You can't just walk in here and humiliate a professional." Samuel stepped closer, his voice calm but sharp. "I wasn't the one who made a fool of himself. You were." The crowd reacted with a collective "Ooh!" as if in an arena. The audience was no longer the villain's accomplice. It was his jury. Preston, cornered, launched a desperate attack. Well, if you insist, I'll call the police myself. I'll say you're causing a disturbance, that you brought fake documents. Some customers immediately protested. That's absurd, one shouted. You're trying to throw the man out by force, said another. Roger Davis, the security guard, appeared. Is there a problem here? Preston pointed a finger at Samuel. Get him out. He doesn't belong here. Roger hesitated. He didn't want to get involved, but the glare of the crowd disarmed him. The social pressure was now on the farmer's side. Samuel didn't budge. He raised his briefcase of documents. If you want to remove me, you'll also have to tear up every paper that proves my purchase. And you'll have to explain it to the bank, to the manufacturer's board, and to every customer here. His steady voice, without shouting, had more power than any attack. The entire showroom burst into spontaneous applause. Preston stood frozen, speechless. The counterattack had begun, but the war was far from over. In the instant the crowd applauded him, Samuel closed his eyes for a second. His memory pulled him back, years earlier, when there were no million-dollar contracts, no dealerships, no applause. There was only dry earth and a boy with cracked feet trying to help his father. His father, Ambrose Carver, a man with calloused hands, handed him a small, rusty key. This was from our first tractor, son. It's been broken for a long time, but you keep it. One day it'll remind you that everything started small. Samuel was 10 years old. He looked at the derelict tractor in the corner of the field. The machine barely ran, but it was a symbol of his family's persistence. With it, his father had managed to plough the first plots of leased land. Nobody respects a poor man, Samuel, Ambrose would say, adjusting his worn hat. But the land doesn't lie. If you plant right, it gives back. His mother Martha would sow by the weak light of a kerosene lamp. The world will laugh at you, son, but don't you laugh back. You work. The silence of hard work speaks louder. That same year, the boy heard his classmates mock him because he went to school in patched clothes. One of them kicked his wooden lunchbox. Samuel didn't fight back. He just remembered his mother's advice. Decades later, that echo was still inside him. The rusty key was still in his wallet, wrapped in a small cloth, a symbol of everything he had achieved and everything he still stood for. Opening his eyes back in the dealership, he felt the strength of his past surge within him. He wasn't just fighting for a purchase. He was honoring every drop of sweat his family had shed on that land. The sound of applause was still ringing when Samuel opened his eyes and returned from the memory. The rusty key, held in his mind, rekindled the certainty that he could not retreat. The crowd was on his side, but he knew Preston hadn't given up yet, and a man wounded by his own arrogance was capable of any low blow. Samuel arranged the file of documents on the counter. He spoke in a firm tone for all to hear. I came here to close a deal, and I will leave with that deal closed. If you try to stop me, I have enough evidence to take this matter further. Preston bit his lip. Pride turned every heartbeat into rage. He leaned over the desk. Don't think you can humiliate me like this. You may have money, you may have contracts, but in here, I'm the one in charge. The statement had no effect. The crowd responded with boos. Samuel maintained his almost solemn posture. Leo beside him discreetly touched his arm, signaling support. Brenda, the manager, intervened, trying to put out the fire. Mr. Carver, let's resolve this professionally. If you'll accompany me to my office, we can prepare the paperwork. Samuel shook his head. No, what began out here ends out here. No closed doors. The response drew a chorus of approval from the audience. Preston, increasingly cornered, was sweating. It was then that he made his riskiest move. He picked up the desk phone and dialed quickly. Roger, get in here immediately, he ordered. Minutes later, Roger Davis, the security guard, returned. This time with another guard by his side. They both stood before Samuel, awaiting orders. Preston raised his voice for everyone to hear. This man is causing a disturbance. He's tried to intimidate employees and disrupt business. I want him out, now. The crowd reacted instantly. A customer shouted, Liar! You're the one causing the disturbance. Another added, You're trying to kick him out because you can't handle the truth. But the guards hesitated. They looked at Preston, then at the crowd, torn. Brenda remained silent, afraid to take a side. Samuel didn't move. He simply opened his briefcase and took out a laminated sheet. "Before you touch me, read this." It was an official letter, signed by the National Director of the Auto Company, Richard Sterling. Special authorization for the immediate release of the fleet of 12 pickup trucks. A stone-cold silence fell. Roger looked at the document, then took a half-step back. "Preston, this is official." Preston tried to snatch the paper from Samuel's hand, but he pulled it back firmly. "No one is going to push me again," the farmer said, in a tone that made even the guards pause. The crowd erupted in applause. Preston, panting, turned red. "This isn't over. If headquarters authorized it, I'll contest it. I'll prove it's fraud." Samuel just gave a slight smile. "Prove it. While you're trying, I'll be hauling the harvest with my new trucks." Preston realized he was losing the game, so he threw his last bluff. "Well, I'm calling the police. I'm going to file a report right now." The audience reacted with astonishment. An older woman yelled, "You're going to invent a crime. That's cowardice." Leo couldn't take it anymore. "Sir, you are tarnishing the name of this dealership. The one who should be leaving is you, not him." All eyes turned to Brenda. The manager was in shock, torn between her duty to protect the store and her fear of confronting the veteran salesman. Preston pressured her. "Back me up, Brenda, or everyone here will laugh at you too." But Brenda didn't answer. The image of Samuel, serene and steadfast, contrasted with the salesman's desperate posture. The audience had already chosen a side. Still, Preston didn't stop. He picked up his cell phone and began to dial. "I'm calling the cops. Let's see if you maintain this attitude with the law." At that moment, Samuel took a step forward. His tone of voice changed. "Go ahead and call. But remember, every person here saw what you did. Every gesture, every word, every humiliation. If you want to make this a police matter, it will be against you." The crowd shouted in unison. "That's right! Against him!" Preston stopped mid-dial. Sweat ran down his face. For the first time, he seemed genuinely unsure. Samuel seized the moment. "I'm not leaving, I'm not giving up. And you know why? Because I'm not just buying these trucks for myself. I'm buying them for a fleet that will transport the work of dozens of families, people who depend on me to get the harvest to the port." The audience fell silent, absorbing the weight of his words. He continued, "Every truck filled with grain carries the struggle of people who wake up at 4 in the morning, and you wanted to throw all that away because of your prejudice." The audience exploded in applause. Some even shouted, "Bravo!" Preston, cornered, felt completely alone. But he still had one card left. "If you think you're going to destroy me, you're mistaken. I'll use everything I can to delay this purchase. I'll drown you in bureaucracy. You may have the money, but I have the system on my side." Samuel stared at him intently. "Then I'll use the system too, not just to buy, but to expose every single one of your actions." Just then, Michael, the bank manager, intervened again. "If this man wants, I will personally contact my connections at the corporate office. This process can be resolved in minutes." Preston lost his footing completely. His last threat seemed fragile against the growing support for Samuel, but the villain still didn't back down. "You don't know who you're dealing with. I don't go down alone. If I have to, I'll drag everyone down with me." The final threat echoed like thunder. The crowd went silent. Everyone understood that the conflict was far from over. Samuel, resolute, knew the real battle was yet to come. And to win it, he would have to show not just money or contracts, but something much deeper. The next day arrived like the promise of a battle. The dealership was hosting a large event to launch new models, with journalists, high-value clients, and representatives from the manufacturer. Colorful balloons, banners, and a large screen lit up the showroom. For Preston, it was a chance to erase the shame of the previous day. For Samuel, it was the perfect arena to reveal the truth. Letitia Barnes, the master of ceremonies, addressed the excited crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the presentation of our brand's new line of pickup trucks." Applause echoed. Preston, in a new suit and a forced smile, mingled with the guests. Feigning confidence, he greeted attendees, trying to hide the weight of the accusations still circulating among staff and customers. But he didn't know that Samuel had prepared something bigger. When Letitia announced the special clients phase, a hush fell over the room. Today, we have the honor of introducing a distinguished buyer who has closed a deal for an entire fleet of vehicles. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Samuel Carver. The crowd stirred in surprise. Many remembered the rumors from the day before. The black farmer who had supposedly bought 12 trucks with cash. Preston clenched his jaw. Samuel walked to the stage with calm steps, the rusty key from the old tractor still in his pocket, a silent reminder of his strength's origin. He climbed the steps, looked out at the audience, and waited for the buzz to die down. Good morning, everyone. Yesterday, in this very place, I was treated like someone who didn't deserve to be here. I was told I had no money, that my documents were fake, that my presence was a nuisance. A murmur went through the attendees. Samuel raised his file and opened it. Today, I'm not just going to talk. I'm going to show you. He removed the first document. Here is the wire transfer confirming the full payment for the 12 pickup trucks. Total value, $1,520,000. Michael, the bank manager, approached the stage and confirmed aloud. The transaction was processed yesterday, without any irregularities. The funds belong to Mr. Carver, a long-standing and respected client of our branch. The crowd reacted with astonished murmurs. Preston, in the back, began to sweat. Samuel pulled out another document. Here is the letter signed by the National Director of the manufacturer, Richard Sterling, authorizing the immediate release of the fleet. Richard, who was at the event, stood up from the front row and raised his hand. I signed it myself. And I reiterate, Mr. Carver is an exemplary customer. The showroom fell into absolute silence. The proof was irrefutable. There was no room for argument. Preston, red-faced, tried to interject. This doesn't prove anything about his character. He still caused a scene, made the dealership look ridiculous, but he was cut off by spontaneous applause from part of the audience, applause that grew until it was deafening. The contrast was cruel. The villain was speaking, but no one was listening. Samuel raised his voice again. I didn't buy these trucks to show off. I bought them because dozens of families depend on them to transport our harvest to the ports. Each vehicle will carry grain that supports workers, schools, hospitals. This isn't a luxury, it's a livelihood. The crowd was moved. Some people nodded silently. Others murmured words of support. He paused, then pulled something from his pocket. It wasn't a document, not a check. It was the small, rusty key. He held it up high. This is the piece of iron my father gave me when I was a child. It belonged to our first tractor. He used to say, the land doesn't lie. Those who plant with dignity reap with dignity. The key gleamed under the stage lights, carrying more weight than any million-dollar contract. The silence that followed was almost sacred. Yesterday, I was laughed at because of the color of my skin and the simplicity of my clothes. Today, you see that no prejudice can erase the truth. There is no appearance worth more than character. An older woman discreetly wiped away a tear. A young man in the back recorded every word. Impressed, the message shot through the room like an arrow. Preston, desperate, shouted, "This is cheap theatrics. He's manipulating all of you." But the words died in the air. Samuel turned slowly to face him. "Theatrics is what you did yesterday, trying to throw me out like I was trash. I just showed the truth." The audience responded with a heavy silence. It was as if everyone was waiting for the final verdict. Then Samuel extended his hand to Richard, the director. "Sir, please confirm the official delivery." Richard came up on stage and symbolically handed over a key ring with 12 shiny new keys. With pride, these vehicles are now ready for service. The room exploded in applause. The journalists' cameras captured the historic moment. A black farmer, once humiliated, now recognized as an example of perseverance and dignity. Preston tried to move but seemed frozen. No words would come. His face was a mask of defeat. Samuel closed his file, put the rusty key back in his pocket and concluded, "The proof has been presented. The verdict each of you has already made." The silence returned, but this time it was filled with respect. The villain had lost his voice. The audience, once complicit in the laughter, was now in awe. It was irrefutable proof. The power had shifted hands. The entire showroom remained silent after the symbolic handover of the keys. It was as if everyone was processing the complete reversal that had just occurred. Samuel stood serenely, holding the small, rusty key of the old tractor in his pocket. In his other hand, the gleaming key ring with 12 new keys. The past and the present collided in his hands. It was then that Richard Sterling, the national director, turned to the audience and said in a firm voice, "This man is proof that our brand needs clients with courage, vision, and values. It is with people like him that we want to be associated." The audience gave a standing ovation, and it was in that instant that the consequences began to fall upon Preston. Brenda Hayes, the manager, rose from the front row. Her expression was no longer one of doubt, but of resolve. She walked onto the stage, and in front of everyone faced Preston, who was still trying to hide in the back. "Mr. Preston Vance, on behalf of the dealership, I am officially terminating your employment with this company, effective immediately." The buzz was instantaneous. Some customers clapped, others nodded in approval. Preston went pale. "What?" he stammered. "You can't fire me here in front of everybody." Brenda didn't waver. "I can and I must. Your actions were recorded, witnessed, and exposed. You not only shamed the dealership, but you attempted to tarnish the name of a valuable client." The crowd applauded again, louder this time. With each clap, Preston felt the ground crumble beneath him. He tried to run to the stage, pointing a finger at Samuel. "This is a setup. This man bought all of you. You can't be this blind." But no one reacted. No one believed him anymore. His co-workers, once his laughing accomplices, looked away in shame. Some even stepped back, as if eye contact with him was toxic. Richard Sterling raised his voice, firm. "That's enough, Mr. Vance. You will be blacklisted from working at any dealership associated with our network. That is the official decision of the board." The final blow landed like a gavel. Preston, stunned, let his phone slip from his hand. The audience erupted in a deafening ovation, no longer for Samuel, but for the public downfall of the villain. A journalist approached and asked loudly, "Mr. Carver, what do you have to say after this turn of events?" He took a deep breath, the rusty key still in his pocket. "I say that no one should ever have to go through what I went through yesterday. This isn't about money. It's about respect. The world needs to understand that dignity is not for sale." The crowd cheered. Some people were crying with emotion. The weight of his statement spread like an electric current. Preston tried one last time to defend himself. "This is an injustice. I was just doing my job." Leo, the young salesman, answered loud and clear, "Humiliating people isn't a job. Pushing a customer around because of his skin color isn't a job. A job is serving with respect." The words cut Preston like a knife. He looked around and realized he had no allies left, not even the security guards. Roger, once obedient, now kept his distance, arms crossed as if to say, "You're on your own." Brenda gestured for 2 employees to approach. "Please escort him to the exit." Preston resisted, trying to maintain some composure. "You're not going to treat me like a criminal. I'll leave on my own." But there was no dignity in his exit. As he walked to the door, the crowd parted and followed him with looks of condemnation. Some filmed, others muttered harsh words. Shameful, racist, got what he deserved. With every step, Preston felt the public humiliation grow. When he reached the door, he turned one last time, pointing a finger at Samuel. "This isn't over." But his voice was lost in the fresh wave of applause that erupted. The door closed behind him, and with it his career, his status, and his credibility. On stage, Letitia took the microphone again, trying to control her emotion. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just witnessed a historic moment. Not just the closing of a major deal, but the victory of dignity over prejudice. Richard spoke again, this time directly to Samuel. From this day forward, you are not just a client, you are a strategic partner. We want to associate your story with our brand. More applause. Samuel, however, remained humble. I'm not doing this for publicity. I'm doing it for everyone who has ever been ridiculed when all they wanted was to be treated as an equal. He held up the rusty key again. This reminds me that nothing started easy, and that when a simple man earns his place, he earns it for all those who came before him. The crowd rose to its feet, moved. Some shouted, "Bravo!" Others just wept in silence. Meanwhile, outside, Preston sat on the curb, defeated. The phone in his hand vibrated with messages from colleagues. Termination confirmed. You're all over social media. The video has gone viral. The man who had laughed in public was now the subject of national scorn. Inside the showroom, Samuel received hugs from strangers, words of support, and requests for photos. He wasn't seeking fame, but he knew his victory was bigger than himself. The public sanction wasn't just Preston's downfall. It was the restoration of a balance. The villain lost everything in front of everyone, and the farmer won not only his fleet, but collective respect. And deep down, Samuel knew this wasn't the final scene of his story, but it was the point where truth crushed the lie and the weight of dignity became impossible to ignore. It took a while for the showroom to quiet down after Preston's fall. People still spoke in low tones, discussing every detail of what they had witnessed. For many, this wasn't just a launch event, it was a public trial, and everyone knew who had won. Samuel remained on the stage, in no hurry to leave. The key ring with the 12 shiny keys was still in his hand, but it was the rusty key in his pocket that felt heavier. He looked at the crowd and realized that every gaze was now one not of suspicion, but of respect. An older woman approached, emotional. "I laughed at you yesterday. I feel so ashamed. You didn't deserve that." Samuel nodded without resentment. The important thing is to learn. Respect is non-negotiable. The crowd applauded again. With his every word, the room filled with reverence. Leo, the young salesman, shyly approached the stage. "Mr. Carver, I wanted to thank you. You have no idea how much courage you gave me. I saw an injustice and wanted to speak up, but I only could because you showed me it was possible." Samuel placed a hand on his shoulder. "What you did today is worth more than any commission. You didn't protect a customer, you protected your own dignity." The audience applauded again, this time for the young man. Leo smiled, embarrassed, but with his head held high. Richard Sterling, the director, took the floor. "In over 20 years in this business, I've never seen anything like this. Mr. Carver, your story is a symbol. I would like to invite you to participate in future brand campaigns." He shook his head humbly. "I appreciate the offer, but I don't want to be a symbol for any company. I want to be remembered as a working man. The only advertising I need is the harvest that feeds people." The simplicity of his answer drew murmurs of admiration. With each sentence, Samuel seemed to impart a hidden lesson to the audience. Brenda Hayes, the manager, finally approached. She was visibly embarrassed. "Mr. Carver, I was wrong too. I stayed silent when I should have stopped Preston's disrespect. I can only apologize." He looked at her firmly. "Silence has its own weight, but acknowledging it is a step. Never again allow anyone to be treated the way I was here." She nodded, touched. The crowd applauded, approving of Samuel's stance. Journalists began to gather, recording statements. One asked, "Do you feel vindicated?" Samuel took a deep breath. "No. Vengeance builds nothing. What happened today isn't about revenge. It's about restored dignity." The words landed like a piece of wisdom. The crowd once more responded with long, heartfelt applause. As the event continued, people came up to him to shake his hand. A simple man, also dressed as a farmer, extended his hand. "Thank you, sir. You don't know the strength you've given us." Samuel shook his hand firmly. "Oh, yes, I do, because I've been in the same place." He turned to everyone, raising his voice one last time in that showroom. "It doesn't matter if it's one rusty key or 12 new trucks. What matters is that every achievement must come with respect. Without it, nothing has value." The silence that followed was reverent. The audience knew they weren't just looking at a farmer. They were looking at a man who had turned humiliation into an example. And in that moment, Samuel's dignity wasn't just his own. It belonged to everyone who had ever been judged by their appearance and who now saw, before their very eyes, the victory of respect over prejudice. Months passed since the day Samuel drove off the dealership lot with his fleet of trucks. The video of the humiliation and the triumph had spread across the country. Newspapers, radio shows, and even television programs told the story of the black farmer who was ridiculed and responded with dignity and irrefutable proof. But Samuel didn't let the fame go to his head. On the farm, the fleet was already working non-stop. The 12 pickups transported workers, supplies, and part of the harvest to the silos. The co-op Samuel helped found was growing rapidly. With his partner, Nia Jones, they expanded operations to include small local farmers. Many who once depended on middlemen were now selling directly for export. In his simple office, on a wooden desk, sat a small safe. Inside, wrapped in a cloth, was the rusty key from the old tractor. Whenever he opened it, Samuel remembered. Nothing started with luxury. Everything came from the land, from persistence, and from the courage to face the laughter of others. His son Isaac, whose memory still ached, was the silent reason behind every achievement. The boy had always dreamed of driving one of the new trucks. Though he was no longer there, Samuel made sure one of them had Isaac discreetly engraved on the bodywork. It was a permanent tribute to a son who left far too soon. Meanwhile, Preston's fate went in the opposite direction. Fired, blacklisted by other dealerships, he ended up in street sales, hawking cell phone plans on busy corners. People recognized him from the viral videos. Some laughed, others looked away. The arrogance he once displayed was gone, replaced by silence and shame. One day, during a celebration for the co-op's record-breaking harvest, Samuel spoke before hundreds of families. "We are not just celebrating a harvest. We are celebrating the respect we have earned together. Because when one person overcomes prejudice, they don't win alone. They clear a path for everyone." Applause echoed across the open field. In the background, lined up, the 12 trucks gleamed under the sun like guardians of this new life. And in Samuel's pocket, the rusty key remained, a constant reminder to never forget where he came from. You have just witnessed the story of Samuel, a simple man who was publicly ridiculed but responded with dignity, courage, and undeniable proof. He didn't seek revenge. He sought respect. And he showed that dignity is not something you ask for, but something you demand. Now the question is for you. How many times have you judged someone by their appearance, their clothes, or the color of their skin? How many stories of greatness and pain might be hidden behind faces the world insists on ignoring? Every time we remain silent in the face of injustice, we help the villain win. But every time we take a stand, as Leo did by supporting Samuel, we help restore what truly matters. If this story touched you, share it. Carry this lesson forward. Because respect should not be the exception. It must be the rule.